Welcome back to the 1% Mind. Today, we are decoding the mechanics of elite execution, the standardization matrix. Imagine a digital media founder at 11 p.m. on a Thursday. Despite their drive and vision, they are paralyzed. They face a backlog of 50 videos, and the weight of the pending work has stalled their progress entirely. This founder treats the upload process as a unique artistic endeavor. They spend 45 minutes on a single description. They research keywords from scratch. They manually debate which subcategories are optimal for every individual piece of media. Now, place an elite systems architect in that same seat. This operator approaches the backlog as an industrial assembly line. Long before the upload, they built an architecture of common problem solution templates. They simply plug new variables into a proven structure. Their tags are standardized and deployed with a single click. The amateur spends 3 hours in a state of cortisol spiking friction. The elite operator executes the same volume in 12 minutes of automated precision. The amateur's exhaustion stems from a failure to eradicate logistical microfriction. They are burning cognitive RAM on data entry, creating a measurable biological cost that we can track through the neuroscience of decision-making. Your prefrontal cortex, the conscious decision-making center of your brain, consumes more glucose than almost any other organ in your body. Every micro-decision, like choosing a video category or writing a unique tag, requires the brain to load variables into working memory, weigh options, and simulate outcomes. This process drains your cognitive battery. Each decision consumes a portion of the brain's physical fuel supply. By mid-afternoon, the brain physically lacks the glucose required for high-level strategy. This is decision fatigue. You become irritable, you make errors in judgment, and you eventually default to the easiest possible path because the energy for complex thought is gone. Treating recurring logistical tasks as bespoke events guarantees this burnout. It places a hard ceiling on your capacity to scale by wasting the fuel intended for strategic growth. To maintain high-level output, the elite shift the burden of execution away from the prefrontal cortex and into the basal ganglia, the center of procedural memory. Consider driving. When you first learn, the prefrontal cortex is hyper-aware of every mirror and pedal. It's exhausting. Years later, the process is a subconscious script. You can drive for miles while focused on a conversation because the task has moved to the basal ganglia. Sovereign architects design their business operations to mimic this neurological automation. They intentionally offload repetitive tasks to bypass the fragile conscious mind. The goal is to systemize every recurring task so perfectly that it functions as a zero-friction script, requiring no conscious thought. Standardized systems act as a protective layer for your creative bandwidth. They handle the logistical heavy lifting, so your mind can remain focused on high-leverage opportunities. Implementation begins with the friction elimination protocol, a 3-tier framework to industrialize your cognitive output. Protocol 1 is the granular systems audit. For 3 days, track the manual decisions you make during your workflow. Look for the invisible friction, searching for a specific folder, debating a recurring text entry, or rewriting an introductory paragraph. If you have to stop and think about how to do a task rather than just doing it, you have found a friction point. A 5-minute manual decision repeated 3 times a week accounts for 13 hours of work per year. More importantly, those are 13 hours of peak state energy lost to logistical maintenance. Repeated manual actions are a tax on your empire. Left unaddressed, they consume the resources required to move your business to the next stage of growth. In Protocol 2, you become the industrial engineer and build the master templates. A master template is a pre-calculated algorithm. It solves the variables of a task in advance, removing the need for future decision-making. In a digital library, this means predetermining the narrative arc of your content, pre-selecting platform categories, and curating grouped tags for single-click deployment. You create the mold so you can simply pour creative energy into it. This applies to all high-stakes environments. An investor uses a rigid checklist to reject deals without hesitation. A consultant uses modular, interchangeable blocks to assemble proposals in minutes. The elite also standardize their personal logistics, from their wardrobes to their morning routines. Making your logistical life repetitive and predictable allows your strategic thinking to become explosive. You are trading low-value variety for high-value leverage. Protocol 3 is algorithmic delegation, removing the human biological bottleneck from the execution phase. If you are the person physically copying data into a template, you are still trading finite time for logistical outcomes. Standardization provides the structure required to hand a process over to Tier 1 labor leverage. Because the process is now a science rather than an art, a virtual assistant can execute the standard operating procedure flawlessly. You can also utilize code. API integrations can pull data, format text, and publish assets across multiple platforms simultaneously without human intervention. If a task can be mathematically standardized, the sovereign architect steps out of the process. They build the machine and focus on the output. These two approaches lead to different end states. The amateur operator relies on fragile willpower and ends the day overwhelmed and trapped by the friction of their own making. The architect wakes up to an industrialized ecosystem. Their logistical friction has been eradicated, leaving their prefrontal cortex fully online for the work that matters. They spend their day analyzing market data and executing high-leverage decisions that falter the trajectory of their industry. You have a choice: continue bleeding cognitive RAM through disorganized execution, or adopt the discipline to standardize your existence. To join this community of systems architects, like the video and subscribe to the 1% Mind. Share this masterclass with an ambitious colleague who is working 80 hours a week but failing to scale because they refuse to build templates. Unoptimized execution is the primary threat to scale. Stop handcrafting the parts. Start architecting the assembly line. I will see you at the top.